The moon loved her tonight. Its silver light danced across Cassia's fur as she ran, wild and unrestrained, through the whispering forest. The wind tugged at her, urging her faster, as if the night itself celebrated her coming joy. Every stride carried the taste of freedom, of victory. Tomorrow, she would stand beside Alpha Prince Arion, not as a forgotten daughter or the shadow of her sister, but as his chosen mate. Tomorrow, she would belong. Her silver paws struck the earth like a rhythm of triumph. For once, Ursa could not take this from her. Not her joy, not her destiny. The thought made her wolf surge with pride, her howl spilling into the night, strong, radiant, untamed. Slowly, Cassia slowed to a stop by the riverbank. The moon shimmered across the water, reflecting her silver coat like a crown. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet wash over her. For the first time in years, her heart didn't ache. Then, with a deep breath, she shifted. Bones reshaped. Fur withdrew. The silver wolf gave way to soft human skin glistening with moonlight. Cassia reached for the robe hanging from a low branch, its fabric cool against her bare shoulders. She drew it around herself, smiling faintly at her reflection in the water. The same eyes, the same determination. Tomorrow, she would no longer have to hide either. But as she walked back toward the castle, barefoot on the cool stone path, the air changed. It thickened, heavy, charged. A presence pressed against her senses, powerful, commanding, unmistakable. Alpha King George. She didn't see him at first, but she felt him. That silent dominance that seemed to fill every corner of the corridor. His scent, cedar, smoke, and iron, clung to the air. When her gaze finally met his, her breath caught. The king's eyes were dark, assessing, unreadable, yet something in them burned. Cassia's pulse quickened. She dropped her gaze instantly, fighting the sudden heat crawling up her neck. It was wrong to feel this, wrong to notice. Arion was her mate. The ceremony was tomorrow. And yet, the echo of that gaze followed her long after she passed him. She walked faster. The corridor seemed endless, her excitement carrying her forward. The golden torches flickered softly against the stone walls, and the scent of pine and smoke lingered in the air. Arion's scent. It made her smile again, a soft, unguarded thing. But as she turned the last corner, her steps faltered. There, faint at first, then unmistakable, came the sound of laughter. A woman's laughter. Cassia froze. Her smile wavered, her breath catching. Maybe it was one of the servants, she thought quickly, bringing him wine, helping him prepare for tomorrow. But then the laughter turned into something else. Softer, breathier, followed by a low groan that made the blood drain from her face. No, it couldn't be. Her pulse began to pound in her ears. She took a few steps forward, her bare feet whispering against the cold floor. The door to Arion's chamber was half closed, a soft golden light spilling through the crack. Another sound, a gasp, a moan, broke through, and Cassia's hand trembled as she reached for the door. Her mind screamed to turn back, but her heart needed to know. She pushed the door open. The world stopped. Arion's broad back gleamed with sweat in the candlelight. His hands clutched the silk sheets, and beneath him, tangled in the bed, was Ursa, her sister, her own blood. Cassia couldn't breathe. The air vanished from her lungs. Her vision blurred as her sister's head turned toward her, golden hair spilling over her shoulders, lips curved into a wicked, knowing smile. "Cassia," Ursa purred, her voice dripping with mockery. "You're early." Arion jerked slightly, as if caught doing something trivial, not monstrous. But he didn't move away. His chest heaved as he looked back at Cassia, not guilty, not ashamed, simply annoyed. "Cassia, listen," he began. But she couldn't. She could only stare. Her heart cracked open, splintering under the weight of betrayal. Her sister's hand slid up Arion's chest deliberately, almost lazily, her gaze never leaving Cassia's frozen form. "You were never meant to see this, sister," Ursa whispered, voice like poison. "Stop it," Cassia choked out, her voice trembling. "Ursa, stop!" But Ursa only laughed, a cruel musical sound that made Cassia's skin crawl. Arion sighed, rubbing his temple as though her pain were an inconvenience. "Cassia, it was only once," he said coolly. "You know I'm alpha. I have the right to more than one mate. You'll still be Luna Princess. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed." The words hit harder than claws. Cassia stumbled backward, her body shaking. Her wolf screamed inside her chest, a raw, wounded sound that made her vision swim. She looked at Arion, the man she had dreamed of, the man she had trusted, and saw only emptiness where love used to be. "You disgust me," she whispered. Ursa's laughter followed her like knives. "Don't be dramatic, sister. The moon goddess made us to share everything, didn't she?" Cassia's scream tore through the room, a sound so broken it silenced even Ursa's mockery for a heartbeat. Then Cassia turned and fled, her robe whipping behind her as she ran through the corridor. Her tears blinded her. Her bare feet pounded against the cold stone, each step echoing her heart's collapse. By the time she reached the outer doors, she was already shifting. Bones stretched, silver fur erupted across her skin. Her human cry became a wolf's howl, sharp, aching, endless. The forest answered her with silence. She ran. Through the trees, through the moonlight, through the pain. The taste of betrayal lingered in her mouth, bitter and metallic like blood. Her paws struck the earth furiously, her breaths coming ragged, her eyes burning. The world that had once felt full of promise now felt like a cage. Every memory, Arion's smile, his vows, his touch, became shards slicing through her heart. She had thought she finally belonged. She had thought she had won. But Ursa had taken everything again. Cassia stopped only when she reached the cliff overlooking the valley. The moon hung high, pure and merciless, watching her break. She lifted her muzzle and howled, long, mournful, defiant. It wasn't just grief that tore from her throat, it was rage, and something darker taking root beneath it. The forest carried her cry across the mountains, a sound that would haunt the kingdom by dawn. For in that moment, as her howl echoed through the night, Cassia swore that she would never be the weak sister again. Cassia's howl still trembled in the air, fading into the vast loneliness of the valley. Her silver fur shimmered under the cold moonlight, wet with tears that refused to dry. She stood on the cliff's edge, chest heaving, heart cracked beyond repair. Beneath her, the forest swayed gently, whispering secrets to the wind. She wanted to leap, to disappear, to let the pain consume her whole. But even that felt too merciful. She sank to her haunches, trembling, staring into the endless dark below. For a long while she said nothing. Then her body began to shift. The silver wolf gave way to trembling human skin, knees pressing into the damp earth. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. The forest air was sharp and cold, but nothing compared to the chill crawling through her soul. How many times had she been here? Alone, hurting, forgotten, while Ursa basked in love that wasn't hers. How many times had she swallowed her pain just to keep the peace? Cassia dug her fingers into the soil, nails biting deep. It had always been this way. Her memories returned like ghosts. She saw herself as a child, no more than 5, holding a small carved wolf she had made out of driftwood, smiling proudly. She had run to her mother's chamber, eager for praise. Lady Grace hadn't even looked up from her mirror. Her eyes, painted in gold dust, reflected only her own bitterness. "Not now, Cassia. Ursa is sleeping." Cassia had stood there for a long time, the little wolf clutched tightly in her hands. When Ursa later woke, her mother smiled, lifting the child in her arms with warmth Cassia had never known. "You're my moonbeam," Grace had whispered to Ursa. "You're everything I ever prayed for." And Cassia, Cassia had simply walked away, clutching the toy until it broke in her hands. Now, under the same moonlight years later, the same emptiness returned, sharper, deeper. She could still hear her mother's voice from all those years ago, whispering venom wrapped in silk. "You remind me of him, the man who ruined me, the one who left before you could even walk. I tried so hard to erase you so I wouldn't remember him anymore, but you wouldn't leave. The moon goddess punished me with you. Every time I see your face, Cassia, I see his betrayal." That had been the night Cassia stopped asking why her mother didn't love her, because she already knew. She was the punishment. The curse born of a broken bond. And Ursa, perfect, radiant Ursa, was the blessing that came after. The true child of the moon goddess's mercy. Grace made sure Cassia never forgot it. Every toy, every dress, every kind word Cassia received was taken the moment Ursa asked for it. "Be the bigger sister," her mother would say sweetly, watching Cassia's tears with mild annoyance. "Let Ursa have it. You wouldn't want to upset her, would you?" So she gave, over and over again, until there was nothing left of her joy to take. But this time, this betrayal cut too deep. Her mate, her love, her future, all taken, again, by Ursa. Cassia's breath came unsteady as her nails dug deeper into the dirt. The moon's light made her tears glisten, but her eyes no longer burned. They were cold now, hollow, shining with something new. Defiance. The forest around her felt different, alive and listening. Her wolf stirred inside her chest, wounded but awake, growling inside her. Cassia lifted her head, her silver hair tangled around her tear-streaked face. The night wind brushed against her skin, gentle but cold, as if the moon goddess herself watched her from above. She whispered hoarsely, "You cursed me with her, didn't you? With a mother who could never love me. With a sister who would always take what's mine." Her words trembled, rising into the night air. But no more. "I will not bow again." Somewhere far behind her, the castle bells rang softly, calling the night guards. But Cassia didn't move. She sat there, staring at the moon. The same moon that had watched her suffer since birth. And for the first time, she didn't pray for peace. She prayed for strength. When she finally rose, her body ached, her skin cold and bruised, but her eyes blazed with quiet fury. She wrapped her torn robe tighter around herself and began to walk back towards her home. The path that had once been lined with soft memories now felt haunted. Every stone seemed to echo her past, her mother's coldness, Ursa's laughter, Arion's betrayal. By the time she reached the city gates, the night guards straightened nervously. Her aura had changed, colder, sharper. Her silver hair caught the moonlight like fire, and her gaze silenced every question. She passed through them without a word. The betrayal wasn't just Arion's. It had been years in the making. Her mother's poison had taught Ursa everything she knew, and tonight, Cassia would face them both. The manor loomed ahead like a sleeping beast, its towers veiled in mist and moonlight. Cassia walked through its gates barefoot, her robe clinging to her like wilted petals. Her heart was numb now, not beating, just existing. Every step echoed in the marble hall like a ghost returning home. At the end of the corridor, Lady Grace waited. Draped in crimson velvet, she sat beside the hearth, sipping wine from a goblet of gold. The firelight painted her face in cruel beauty, flawless, distant and sharp. Beside her reclined Ursa, draped in silk, her hair still tousled from Arion's bed. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Only the fire crackled. Then Ursa smirked. "You look dreadful, sister." Cassia's fists tightened. "How could you?" Ursa tilted her head, feigning innocence. "How could I what? Please the same man who promised himself to you? Oh, Cassia, don't be so dramatic. Wolves share, do they not?" Cassia took a step forward, her voice trembling. "He was my mate." "Was," Lady Grace corrected smoothly, her eyes gleaming with wine and indifference. And you'd do well to remember that alphas aren't bound by mortal notions of loyalty. They take what they desire. Always have. Always will. Cassia's throat tightened. And you're defending her? Lady Grace sighed, setting down her goblet. Arion is the one without honor, not Ursa. A true mate doesn't stray unless he's led astray by weakness. That's on him, not my daughter. Your daughter? Cassia's voice cracked. And what am I then? Lady Grace's gaze hardened, her tone silk over steel. You are a reminder of my mistake. The daughter of a man who left me shamed and alone before the moon goddess bound me to another. I raised you, fed you, kept you under this roof. Is that not enough? Cassia's breath came shallow. You don't even call me your own. Ursa chuckled, reclining deeper into her chair. Oh, come now, don't cry. Mother and I were just talking. Imagine if Arion took both of us as mates. Wouldn't that be amusing? You could help raise my pup when I give birth to the next prince. The words hit harder than any slap. Lady Grace laughed, a low, delighted sound that turned Cassia's stomach. Ursa has a point, she mused. If both my daughters are bound to the alpha line, it would be quite the blessing. The moon goddess must favor us indeed. Cassia stood frozen, staring at them. Mother and sister, united in mockery. Her hand trembled at her side, nails digging into her palm until blood welled. Do you hear yourselves? She whispered. Do you even know what shame means? Lady Grace waved her hand dismissively. Spare us your righteousness, Cassia. You've always been too fragile for this world. Maybe now you'll learn that love is not a fairy tale. Ursa leaned forward, her smile sharp. Or maybe you'll learn that the moon gives light to whoever stands closest. Too bad you've always been in my shadow. Cassia's tears dried mid-fall. Her breathing slowed. Her heart steadied. The pain inside her, that wild, burning ache, cooled into something sharp, silent, and dangerous. She looked from her mother to her sister and smiled. A small, brittle smile that made both women shift uneasily. You're right, Cassia said softly. The moon does not favor the weak. Lady Grace frowned. What are you implying? Cassia turned toward the window, the moonlight silvering her hair. That under the next full moon, both of you will understand what it means to underestimate me. Ursa laughed, but there was a tremor beneath it. Empty threats, dear sister? Cassia glanced back, her eyes glowing faintly, her wolf stirring beneath her skin. Not a threat, she said. A promise. The fire guttered. The air shifted, colder now, as though the castle itself recognized the birth of something dangerous. The death of the girl who once yielded, and the rise of the woman who would not. The moon hung full and unblinking above the kingdom, its silver glow spilling through the arched windows of the grand hall. Every chandelier shimmered with crystal tears, casting prismatic light over rows of nobles in embroidered finery. The air was heavy with perfume, tension, and prophecy. Tonight was not merely a mating ceremony. It was a coronation of love, blood, and power. Cassia stood at the heart of it all. Her gown, white as moonlight, laced with silver thread, clung to her like frost. The fabric shimmered when she moved, but her face remained carved from stillness. To the unknowing eye, she was radiant, the picture of grace, the perfect future Luna Queen. Yet behind her calm eyes burned a storm that no silk could hide. Her heart pounded, not with excitement, but with purpose. Every beat was a reminder of Ursa's smirk, her mother's laughter, Arion's betrayal. Every breath tasted of vengeance. At the end of the aisle, Alpha Prince Arion waited, tall, handsome, his posture dripping with confidence. He looked like a man who had everything, power, legacy, and the woman everyone he loved. Only Cassia knew the truth beneath that regal facade. As the musicians struck their lyres, she walked toward him, her silver train gliding over the marble like mist. The crowd hushed. Even the moonlight seemed to follow her. From his throne, Alpha King George watched. His eyes, ancient, commanding, never left her. There was something unreadable in his gaze, something that burned through her composure. Cassia felt it, the way one feels lightning before it strikes. He said nothing, but his silence felt heavy, as though he already knew what was coming. Cassia stopped before Arion. He smiled, confident. "You look beautiful, my Luna." Her lips twitched into a polite smile that never reached her eyes. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, but she did not flinch. The high priestess stepped forward, her robes gleaming with white embroidery. "Before the moon goddess we gather," she intoned. "Two souls bound by fate, two wolves joined by blood and spirit." The audience bowed their heads in reverence. Only Cassia's gaze remained forward, locked on the moonlight spilling through the glass ceiling above. The priestess turned to Arion first. "Alpha Prince, do you claim this she-wolf as your mate and equal under the light of the goddess?" "I do," Arion said proudly, his voice echoing through the hall. "Then mark her, as the moon bears witness." Arion reached for her, his fingers brushing her hair aside to reveal her neck. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation. Cassia's pulse quickened, but not from fear. When his fangs sank gently into her skin, the crowd erupted in cheers. Gold light flared between them, the sign of the mate bond being sealed. It should have ended there. But Cassia did not move. The priest turned to her. "And you, Cassia of noble blood, daughter of Lady Grace, do you mark your mate, the Alpha Prince, and seal your bond beneath the sacred moon?" Silence. Cassia's gaze lifted to the moonlight above, her lips trembling, not from emotion, but from restraint. Slowly, she turned to face Arion. He was smiling still, expecting her compliance, expecting her approval. Cassia smiled back, a slow, haunting smile. Then, softly, too softly, she said, "No." The words sliced through the air. The music stopped. The priestess froze. Murmurs rippled through the hall like ripples on a poisoned lake. Arion blinked, uncertain he'd heard correctly. "What did you say?" Cassia's voice rose, clear and cold. "I said no." Gasps echoed. Nobles shifted uneasily. Ursa, seated beside Lady Grace, went pale, her lips parting in disbelief. Arion's expression hardened. "Cassia, what are you doing?" "What I'm doing," she said evenly. "I reject you, Alpha Prince Arion." Arion staggered back, the pain of the rejection burning through his veins as his wolf howled in agony. You cannot." But Cassia wasn't finished. Her voice carried through the hall, steady as the moon's light. "You mocked the bond blessed by the moon goddess herself. Tonight, before your people, before the king, before the moon that sees all." She paused, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "I reject you as my mate." A roar of disbelief surged through the room. A noble woman rose from her seat shouting, "This madness! How can she reject the Alpha?" Arion's face twisted in pain and disbelief, but he stood tall. "If you reject me, then you must have another. Who is he your heart now desires?" he asked. Cassia looked at the priestess, then at the throne. "By the law of the moon, a bond rejected is a bond undone. I stand free, unclaimed, unbroken, unbound." And then she turned toward the dais. Alpha King George sat unmoving, his eyes locked on hers. The hall had fallen utterly silent. Even the wind seemed to pause at the threshold. Cassia's voice softened, but the words carried like thunder. "If the moon goddess wills it, I choose a new path. I choose the Alpha King as my mate." A single heartbeat, and then the hall erupted into chaos. "No," shouted nobles. "This is an abomination. She cannot. The prince's mate, the king." But the Alpha King rose slowly, each step he took down the dais echoing like a drumbeat. Power rolled off him, ancient, suffocating, absolute. The hall quieted again as they watched to see what the Alpha King would do. When he stood before Cassia, the difference in their stature was stark. She, the broken daughter of a bitter house. He, the ruler of all alphas. Yet his gaze held no anger, only an unreadable stillness. "Do you understand the weight of your words?" he asked quietly. "I do," she said, her voice trembling but sure. His gaze softened, just for a moment. Then he turned to the priestess. "By the law of the moon, if a she-wolf rejects her mate, she stands free to bind anew." The priestess hesitated, shaking. "My king, this would defy all order." The king's voice cut through the noise. "Then let the moon judge us both." He reached for Cassia's neck, his lips grazing lightly before his fangs sank into her. Cassia gasped as the energy pulsed through her. She reached for the king's neck, her body still trembling as he steadied her with his hands. She sank her fangs, sealing the mate bond. Gasps filled the hall. The golden flare of the moon bond ignited between them, brighter, fiercer than any before it. The walls themselves seemed to hum. When the light dimmed, Cassia stood in stunned silence, her neck throbbing, her wolf howling deep within her soul. The king turned to the court, his tone calm but final. "By the goddess's law, she is mine. She is queen." The hall erupted into shouts, nobles falling to their knees, others watching in disbelief. Ursa's face twisted in horror. Lady Grace's scream echoed like breaking glass. Arion stood frozen, his hands clenched, eyes blazing with betrayal. Cassia turned toward Arion, her expression unreadable. She stepped close enough for only him to hear. "That," she whispered, "was for sleeping with my sister." Then she turned away, the silver hem of her gown sweeping behind her as the crowd bowed low before the new queen. The woman who had defied fate itself under the full gaze of the moon. The royal chamber was vast, echoing with a stillness that carried its own kind of power. Golden sconces burned low on the walls, their flames swaying gently as though fearful of the man who stood before them. And tonight, Cassia stood within it, trembling not from the chill but from the weight of what had just unfolded in the grand hall. The gown she wore, once white, now clung to her like ashes of rebellion. The heavy crown on her head pressed against her temple, as though reminding her of the crime she'd committed before the realm. Rejecting the heir, her chosen mate, before all, and choosing his father instead. She could still hear the gasps, still see Ursa's face, frozen in disbelief, her mouth parting like a struck child. Orion's snarl, filled with wounded pride, had chased her through the silence. Yet now, as she stood alone in the Alpha King's chamber, that defiance wavered. The fire of vengeance that had driven her to that reckless decision flickered beneath a tide of fear. The heavy doors groaned open. Cassia's spine stiffened, her heart lurched. King George entered, slow, deliberate, every movement a command. His robe trailed behind him like a living shadow, the silver crest of the royal wolf glinting against black silk. His presence filled the room, powerful and still, a storm that didn't need to thunder to be feared. Cassia bowed her head quickly, her trembling hands clutching the folds of her gown. She dared not look up. She had seen the way his gaze burned through her, the quiet hunger of a man who wanted, but never begged. "You should sit," his deep voice said. The sound of it brushed through her like thunder restrained. She didn't move. "Your Majesty," she whispered, forcing steadiness into her voice. "If this is to be my punishment, I'll accept it. I just ask that you make it quick." King George paused mid-step. "Punishment?" She swallowed. "For humiliating the prince, for challenging the order of the pack. I know what I did was forbidden, but I couldn't let them laugh at me any longer." He studied her quietly. For a long, unbearable moment she felt his gaze, not the hungry kind she'd braced for, but something else, something sharper, understanding perhaps. "Look at me." She lifted her chin slowly, and when their eyes met she was startled by what she saw, not rage, not lust, but weariness. The kind that comes from carrying a secret too long. "You think I'd take you out of anger?" he asked, voice low but commanding. You think I'd use what Arion ruined as a toy to prove a point? Cassia blinked, unsure how to answer. He stepped closer until the space between them was heavy with tension. I saw your pain tonight. I saw your courage. You stood before hundreds and claimed your worth when no one else dared give it to you. His jaw tightened. I marked you not as ownership, Cassia, but as protection. Her lips parted slightly. Protection? The council would have called for your exile, or worse, your execution. You humiliated the future Alpha before the nobles. They would not have forgiven that. His eyes softened, just a fraction. But they won't touch a queen. No one will. Cassia's throat tightened. You didn't have to. I did. The firmness in his tone cut her short. Because I know what it is to stand alone, lonely, and heartbroken. The words hit deeper than she expected. Cassia blinked rapidly, but the tears still came. She turned away quickly, gripping the edge of the marble table to steady herself. He moved closer, his voice quieter now. Cassia, I will never take what is not freely given. You are under my protection, not my command. If one day you wish to break the bond, I will grant it. Without shame, without question. That she hadn't expected. She turned back to him, uncertain. Why would you do that, my king? For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the low hum of the fire. Then he said, Because sometimes we make rash decisions in anger and you are no different. Her breath caught. He had seen through her, through the steel, through the anger, into the brokenness she had buried for years. Rest now, he said softly. No harm will come to you here, not from me, not from anyone. He turned and began to leave, his steps heavy but measured. The great door shut behind him with a deep, echoing thud, leaving Cassia alone in the silence. She stood there for a long time, her hand on her neck where his mark now pulsed faintly beneath her skin. The bond's warmth was unlike any she'd felt before, not a chain but a strange, steady hum, not possession, but protection. As she sat on the edge of the massive bed, the weight of the crown beside her, tears slipped down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of something she hadn't felt in a while. Hope. For the first time, the moonlight streaming through the high arched window did not feel cold. It felt like a witness, a quiet promise. Alpha Prince Arion sat in the dim chamber that once symbolized power, his body hunched forward, his golden eyes dull with defeat. The weight of rejection pressed on his chest like an iron chain. The mate bond, that sacred celestial thread spun by the moon goddess herself, pulsed faintly within him, a broken string humming with pain. Every beat of his heart dragged her name through his veins. Cassia. He muttered it under his breath again and again, as though the repetition could somehow dull the agony. But it didn't. He had felt her rejection like fire. The moment she said the words, I choose the Alpha King, something inside him had torn apart. The crowd's gasps, the murmurs, the looks of shock and pity. They had all blurred into nothing compared to the sound of her voice and the emptiness that followed. He had thought he was untouchable. He had believed that his birthright, his charm, his strength were enough to keep her bound to him. But pride, he now realized, was the cruelest poison of all. He leaned back in his chair, the sound of splintering wood echoing faintly. The fire flickered across his face, revealing exhaustion and something worse, regret. His wolf stirred within him, restless, confused, howling softly in his mind for the mate they had lost. The bond might have been broken, but the love, that dangerous, foolish love, refused to die. He remembered her smile, shy, tremulous. He remembered how her silver wolf had danced beneath the moonlight, graceful and proud. And then, he remembered Ursa, her laughter, her cunning, her cruel delight in claiming what was never hers. He slammed his fist against the armrest, the impact shaking the goblet beside him. Wine spilled across the table, dark as blood. I was a fool, he muttered, his voice hoarse. A damned fool. A knock came at the door. He ignored it. It came again. Soft, persistent. "Leave me," he growled. The door opened anyway. Ursa stepped in quietly, wearing a dark gown that shimmered faintly in the firelight. Her beauty was sharp tonight, deliberate, dangerous. Every strand of her golden hair arranged with care, every glance measured. "My prince," she said gently, her tone soaked in concern. "I told you to leave," he snapped. She ignored his words, closing the door behind her. "You shouldn't be alone tonight, Arion. Not after what she did to you." Arion's eyes flared. "Watch your tongue." Ursa's expression softened, almost convincingly. "I'm only saying what everyone else is thinking. Cassia humiliated you. She chose your father of all people. How could any heart bear that?" He rose from his seat so suddenly that the chair toppled. "Enough!" Ursa flinched, then smiled faintly, hiding satisfaction behind a mask of pain. "You still defend her?" she murmured. "Even after she ripped your heart from your chest?" Arion turned away, staring at the flames. His voice dropped low, bitter. "I betrayed her first, but you speak of things you cannot understand." "Oh, I understand more than you think," she whispered, stepping closer. "I know. You are the Alpha Prince, and you shouldn't feel bad for choosing whomever your heart desires. But I really pity her." He glanced back at her. "Pity?" "Yes," Ursa said, voice smooth as honey. "Because she's trapped herself. The people will never respect her. They call her a witch already, say she bewitched the king. And when the king grows tired of her, what then? She'll fall, Arion. And when she does, we will be the ones to rise." He studied her closely. Her words slithered through the air, intoxicating, dangerous. "We?" he asked. Ursa's smile deepened, slow and deliberate. "You and I. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, my prince. Maybe she meant for us to rule together. Cassia may have stolen your ceremony, but she hasn't stolen your destiny. You are still the heir, still the future Alpha King." He turned away again, jaw tight. "You speak of crowns while my heart bleeds, Ursa." "I speak of revenge," she said softly. The firelight flickered, casting her shadow long against the wall, a beautiful silhouette hiding a venomous heart. "Revenge," she continued, stepping closer until her hand brushed his arm. "Against those who humiliated you, against her, against the father who took what was yours. You have the strength, Arion, the power, the support of the nobles. All you need is the will." Her voice was gentle, but the poison in her words was precise. Arion didn't respond immediately. His eyes stared into the fire, watching it twist and crackle. "I don't want to hurt her anymore," he said finally, his voice low, broken. "I just want her back." Ursa blinked, surprised. "After what she's done?" "She was my mate," he murmured. "My heart still knows her. The bond may be gone, but the love—" He stopped himself, swallowing hard. "It's still there." Ursa's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Then win her back," she whispered, pressing a hand to his chest. "Show her the man she lost. Make her regret choosing the king. And when she comes crawling back, you'll have both her heart and her crown." Arion didn't push her away, but neither did he return the touch. His eyes darkened, lost somewhere between longing and fury. "Perhaps," he said quietly. "You're right." Ursa's lips curled in satisfaction. "Exactly." But when she turned to leave, her eyes flickered with frustration. She had hoped for more, a promise, a pact, a shared sin. Instead, she had only sown the seed. Arion watched her go, his thoughts heavy. When the door closed, he sank back into the chair, staring into the dying fire. He could still feel Cassia's scent in his memory, wild and sweet, like the wind after rain. His heart ached for her, even as his pride screamed against it. Outside, the moon rose higher, silver light spilling through the window. Ursa's footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor, soft, satisfied, plotting. And in the quiet of that night, two hearts, one broken by love, the other driven by envy, began a dangerous dance that would soon set the kingdom aflame. The moon was high, silver light spilling through the lattice windows of the royal garden, painting the marble paths in quiet grace. Cassia walked alone, her cloak brushing softly against the dew-kissed grass. Since the night she became queen, she had not slept easily. The whispers of the court haunted her, that her marriage was a scandal painted in vengeance. Yet beneath those poisonous rumors lay a truth more tormenting. She had come here for revenge, and yet revenge was beginning to feel hollow. That was when she saw him again, Alpha King George, standing by the ancient fountain, his hands clasped behind his back, his golden eyes lost in the ripples of water. He looked every inch the ruler he was, his presence commanding yet strangely calm. Cassia froze, uncertain whether to approach. But the king spoke first, his voice deep and steady, carrying that quiet power that could silence storms. "You walk with too much weight upon your shoulders, my queen." She startled slightly, turning to meet his gaze. "Your Majesty, I did not mean to intrude." "You are my wife, Cassia," he said softly. "You cannot intrude upon what is already yours." Those words lingered, warm and dangerous. She bowed her head, unwilling to meet his eyes. She feared what he might see there, her confusion, her guilt, the faint spark of admiration she refused to name. He gestured toward the fountain. "Do you know the story of this garden?" Cassia shook her head. "It was planted by my first queen," George said, his tone shifting, like a man speaking through memory. "She loved roses, said they made even a broken heart believe again." There was a pause. The night wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and sorrow. He turned his gaze to her, and for a heartbeat, she saw it. The pain that lingered beneath his calm exterior, the loneliness that even a crown could not silence. "Until fate took her from me." Cassia didn't press. She didn't need to. She knew that pain, the pain of being bound to destiny's cruelty. They stood in silence, side by side, two souls who had both been betrayed by love in different ways. The king's restraint fascinated her. He was nothing like the picture people painted of him. George's strength was quiet, controlled, regal. He had the power to command armies, yet he would not touch her without her consent. That unsettled her more than she cared to admit. There were moments, fleeting and cruel, when she would glance at George and see traces of Arion's gentleness, the curve of his smile, the warmth that flickered briefly in his eyes before duty replaced it. And then, guilt would crush her, because she was seeing a father, where she should have seen a husband. As days turned to weeks, Cassia found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. Not as a lover, but as a wounded soul drawn to another's silence. He never asked for her affection, never demanded loyalty. He simply was. Present, constant, protective in ways that didn't suffocate her. That restraint was more powerful than any desire. It unraveled her slowly. And yet, there was one truth neither of them dared to speak. George knew she still loved Arion. He saw it in her eyes, the flicker of longing she couldn't mask when his son's name was mentioned. It pierced him, but he bore it with the dignity of a man who understood love too well. He restrained himself. Every instinct as a man, as an alpha, screamed to take her, but he didn't. His love, if one could call it that, was not possession, but patience. Because deep down, he hoped, foolishly, perhaps, that one day she would forgive Arion, that the broken bond between father and son could be mended through her healing. The heavy doors of the royal chamber slammed open with a force that startled the guards outside. Alpha Prince Arion strode in, his eyes burning with fury, his chest heaving with restrained rage. The torches lining the marble walls flared against the gust that followed him, throwing wild shadows across the room. Alpha King George, seated by the grand window, didn't flinch. He had been expecting this storm. The moonlight caught the edges of his silver crown, reflecting on the lines of wisdom and fatigue etched into his face. Arion's jaw clenched. "Why did you steal what was mine?" The king rose slowly, his broad frame casting a long shadow across the chamber. His golden eyes met Arion's, calm against chaos, wisdom against youth. "I stole nothing," George said evenly. "You threw her away yourself." Arion's nostrils flared. "You had no right," he roared, slamming his fist against the marble table. "You could have chosen any woman in this realm, father, any noble daughter, any widow longing for a crown. But no, you took her. My mate. The one I—" His voice broke before he could finish. The word love hung unspoken in the air, too heavy for his pride to bear. George stepped closer, his presence commanding but not cruel. "I did what you could not. I spared her from humiliation, from punishment, from a council ready to strip her of her wolf for rejecting an alpha prince. You may see betrayal, Arion. I see protection." "Protection?" Arion's laugh was sharp, bitter. "You call marking my mate protection?" The king studied his son for a long moment, then spoke softly. "You are my son, Arion. And if you are wise, you will see the motive behind what I have done." Arion frowned. "What motive?" George's expression remained unreadable, his tone nearly fatherly. "That's for you to figure out. But I hope you see your folly before it's too late." Arion's chest tightened. For a moment the fury dimmed, replaced by confusion. "I don't understand you, father, or the games you play, but I would never think you would desire my mate," he said bitterly. George's eyes softened, but his words cut clean. "She is not my possession. She made her choice, just like you made yours." Arion turned away, his fists trembling. "I will take her back," he said finally, his tone low, trembling with conviction. "No matter the bond you forged, I will undo it. She was mine first. She will be mine again." The king regarded him quietly. No anger, no mockery, only a long, tired sigh. "Then take her back," he said simply. Arion blinked. "You would let me?" "I will not chain her," George replied. "If she still loves you, no crown will stand in her way." The silence that followed was thick. Arion searched his father's face for deceit but found none, only a strange, sorrowful acceptance. He turned sharply toward the door. "Then I will prove her heart still belongs to me." "Prove it to yourself first," George murmured, but Arion was already gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. When the chamber was quiet again, Alpha King George exhaled, the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing against his chest. He smiled faintly to himself, not the smile of triumph, but of hope. He closed his eyes briefly. He had felt it in the way her voice softened whenever she spoke of Arion, in the way her scent shifted when his name was mentioned, a bittersweet ache neither time nor distance could erase. He hoped that his son would find wisdom before desire, that love would heal where pride had destroyed. The morning air was crisp when Ursa arrived at the royal castle, uninvited but unafraid. Her deep green cloak trailed behind her like a shadow, her golden hair gleaming in the sunlight as if mocking the darkness brewing inside her. She had come to see Arion, not as a lover, but as a woman unwilling to be forgotten. The guards hesitated to let her in, their eyes shifting nervously. Rumors of the king's new bride, Cassia, Ursa's own sister, had spread like wildfire, and everyone knew the tension simmering beneath the royal roof. When Arion finally appeared in the corridor dressed in black and silver, Ursa's heart twisted. He looked worn, his once bright eyes dulled by guilt and confusion. "Arion," she called softly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He paused, gaze cold, yet weary. "You shouldn't be here, Ursa." "Your father took your mate," she cut in, her voice sharp with disbelief. "And you're just standing here doing nothing?" Her words struck him, but not in the way she hoped. Arion's jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling as he struggled to contain the storm inside. For days, he had wrestled with anger and shame, but his time away from Cassia had changed something in him. The sight of her standing beside his father, proud, gentle, wounded, had stirred something painful and true. "I won't fight him," he said finally, his voice low, dangerous. Ursa blinked, stunned. "What do you mean you won't fight him? He stole what's yours. He humiliated you before the entire court." Arion's eyes darkened, but not with rage, with resolve. "No, Ursa. I humiliated myself the moment I betrayed her, the moment I believed you." Ursa's throat tightened. You can't mean that." "I do," he said, stepping closer until she could feel the heat of his anger. "You wanted me to destroy my father, to ruin Cassia, to crown myself through hatred. But I see you now, Ursa. I see what you are. It was a mistake ever lying beside you, a mistake that nearly cost me the woman I love." Ursa's face twisted with fury and heartbreak. "You'll regret saying that," she spat, voice trembling. "Perhaps," Arion said, turning away. "But I'll never regret walking away from you." That single act, of choosing love over vengeance, shattered the last fragments of control Ursa had. When she returned home, her mother, Lady Grace, was waiting. She saw the rage in Ursa's eyes and the humiliation trembling beneath her defiance. Ursa recounted everything: Arion's words, his refusal to fight, his confession of love for Cassia. Lady Grace's expression darkened. "So he still loves her," Lady Grace murmured bitterly, "even after everything she's done." "She bewitched him," Ursa hissed, pacing. "Both of them. Don't you see, Mother? The king, too. How else could he have taken her as his queen?" Lady Grace's lips curved slowly into a poisonous smile. "Then let the world believe it." That night, mother and daughter began their quiet campaign of venom. Servants who once worked in the castle received gifts of coin for whispers. Traders traveling through the markets carried tales wrapped in secrecy. Every rumor began the same: the new queen is not what she seems. They said Cassia's eyes glowed under the moonlight. They said she spoke to wolves who didn't belong to the royal pack. They said she used enchantments to make both father and son fall under her spell. The whispers slithered through the kingdom like smoke, through markets, inns, even the training grounds of the palace. Warriors who once bowed to their queen now glanced at her with suspicion. Nobles traded wary glances during court gatherings. Cassia began to notice. Conversations fell silent when she entered a room. The weight of unseen eyes pressed against her like a curse. In the king's chamber, George felt it too. The shift, the fear, the quiet doubt gnawing at his counsel. He knew the danger of a rumor left to grow unchecked. Yet what pained him most was the sorrow in Cassia's eyes, the return of that haunted look he'd worked so hard to erase. Outside the castle walls, Ursa watched from the shadows, her heart pounding with a wicked thrill. For the first time since losing everything, she felt powerful again. And beside her, Lady Grace whispered the same words she had spoken years ago, the words that once tore their family apart. If truth won't destroy her, then let lies do what truth could not. But neither of them knew. The more they whispered, the closer father and son would be drawn together again. The grand hall of the royal castle trembled under the weight of authority. Sunlight streamed through tall arched windows, falling across the marble floor like shards of judgment. The air was thick with tension as nobles filled the chamber, their whispers slithering between velvet robes and jeweled collars. Alpha King George entered, his stride deliberate, his presence commanding silence. The golden crest of his lineage glinted on his cloak, but his eyes, sharp, cold, and storm-dark, carried the power that made even seasoned warriors avert their gaze. Behind him stood Cassia, pale but unyielding. She felt the burn of 100 eyes, questioning her worth. Whispers about witchcraft and seduction had spread like wildfire, and the weight of every rumor pressed down on her chest. But the king had summoned the council himself, not to punish her, but to silence the lies. When he reached the throne, he did not sit. Instead, his voice boomed through the hall, resonating like thunder. I did not summon you here for counsel. I summoned you here for correction. The murmurs died instantly. For weeks, he continued, his gaze sweeping across the hall, poison has been allowed to seep through my kingdom. Lies and whispered by cowards, believed by fools, have stained the name of your queen. I will not have it. A nobleman, one of the elder alphas, cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, the people will believe what we allow them to, the king cut in sharply. And if you think I will stand idle while false tongues defame my queen, then you mistake my mercy for weakness. Cassia's heart skipped. My queen. He'd never said it like that before, not just as a title, but as something personal, something claimed. The Alpha King stepped forward, his voice lowering but growing fiercer. Cassia is innocent. She has no ties to dark magic, nor has she bewitched anyone. I chose her as my mate out of free will. The nobles glanced uneasily at one another. No one dared to interrupt again. Let this be the last time her name is dragged through the mud of rumor. If another voice speaks against her without proof, that voice will answer to me directly, not as a king, but as a wolf. His aura flared, and for a moment, the air in the hall crackled with power. Every man there could feel it, the might of an alpha who ruled not just by title, but by sheer force of will. When he turned, his gaze softened. He offered Cassia his hand, guiding her forward. Cassia stepped closer, her heart pounding as her hand met his. Her lips parted, but no words came. The hall bowed before them, and for the first time since her marriage, she didn't feel like an imposter in the royal seat. Later that evening, silence blanketed the castle. Cassia stood on the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair, replaying the moment over and over. The way he had looked at her, the conviction in his voice, the quiet protectiveness that had melted the walls she'd built. When George joined her, she didn't turn immediately. She could feel him, his calm presence, his steady breathing. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Defend me so fiercely before them. He leaned against the railing beside her, his gaze fixed on the moon. Yes, I did. I will not allow anyone to dishonor what I've chosen to protect. Her throat tightened. Even if it costs you their respect? He smiled faintly. A king who bends to whispers is no king at all. Cassia turned then, her heart thrumming painfully. The moonlight framed him, strong, steady, heartbreakingly noble. She stepped closer without realizing it. Every heartbeat between them seemed to echo the same unspoken pull, the mate bond that neither could ignore forever. Why do you keep doing this? She murmured. Showing me kindness when I've given you nothing but guilt. He met her gaze. Because I see you. The words cracked something inside her. Tears welled unbidden, and before she could think, she reached up, fingers brushing his cheek. For the first time, he didn't move away. The air between them thickened. Warm, electric. Her lips trembled as she leaned forward, heart pounding. But just before their lips met, his hand came up, gently, firmly, stopping her. Cassia froze, confusion flickering across her face. George's voice was soft, almost pained. Not like this, Cassia. Not while your heart still belongs elsewhere. And with that, he was gone, leaving her trembling beneath the moonlight, torn between the ghost of the man who broke her heart and the king who was slowly teaching her how to feel again. The dawn was gray when Arion rose from his bed, his sleep broken by guilt and the echo of whispered lies. For nights he had endured sleepless hours, haunted by the thought that Cassia, the woman he had wronged, now carried the burden of a slander she did not deserve. He had watched her from afar, saw the way she walked through the palace with her head high even when courtiers turned their backs. Her strength shamed him, her silence condemned him. The son of the Alpha King could no longer stand idle. When the first light of morning filtered through his chamber windows, Arion summoned his most loyal guards, men who had served him since his first shift, wolves who understood the difference between rumor and truth. "Find who started this," he commanded, his tone cold and sharp as a drawn blade. "Every whisper, every servant, every hand that passed the lie. I want names. I want proof. Leave no shadow unsearched." The guards bowed and vanished into the early mist. Days passed. The castle pulsed with quiet dread as the young prince moved through its halls like a phantom. His presence no longer carried the recklessness of a spoiled heir, but the storm of a man wrestling with the consequences of his pride. He avoided his father's eyes, avoided Cassia's soft gaze, until the day the truth finally returned to him. That night, his captain, Darren, entered his chamber and laid 2 sealed letters upon his table. "My prince," Darren said quietly, "we found the roots of the rumor. It began in the marketplace, spread through servants paid in gold. The ones behind it, they were close to you." Arion opened the letters and read the reports. Each one was worse than the last. The handwriting of witnesses, the testimonies of servants who had been bribed, the seal of the Grace household. His hand trembled, his pulse pounded in his throat. Ursa and Lady Grace. The names burned before his eyes like fire. For a long moment, he sat in silence, the kind of silence that came before a storm. He thought of the laughter that had once bound him and Ursa, the deceitful sweetness of her voice. He thought of how easily he had been manipulated, how willingly he had walked into the ruin of the woman who truly loved him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and deadly calm. "Summon them, both of them. Tomorrow morning, before the full court." The royal court gathered at sunrise. The great hall had never felt so heavy. Banners of silver and black hung from the vaulted ceiling, but even they seemed dim in the cold light that filtered through the windows. Nobles lined the walls, whispering uneasily. Everyone knew this was no ordinary summons. It was a reckoning. At the center of the hall stood Arion, flanked by his guards. His father, King George, sat upon the high throne with Cassia seated beside him, her posture regal, but her eyes wary. When the great doors opened, all murmuring ceased. Ursa walked in first, proud but pale, her emerald gown shimmering as if to mock the occasion. Behind her came Lady Grace, her expression a mask of wounded innocence. Together they bowed, though neither lowered their gaze for long. "Your Majesty," Lady Grace began, her voice smooth as silk, "to what do we owe this most sudden summons?" Arion stepped forward, his boots echoing against the marble. "To truth, Lady Grace," he said coldly. "You and your daughter have been accused of treasonous slander against the Queen." Gasps rippled through the court. Ursa's lips curled. "Treason?" She laughed lightly. "Surely, my prince, you've been misled. We've only spoken what many have seen. That she—" "Silence," Arion thundered. His voice shook the walls. The guards stiffened. Even the king's expression darkened at his son's fury. Arion continued, "You will not defile her name again. Not here. Not before the pack that once honored you." He turned and motioned to his captain. Darren stepped forward, holding a scroll sealed with the royal crest. "These are testimonies," Arion said, "signed and witnessed by those who served in this castle. Servants, traders, even stable hands. Each of them speaks of coins paid to spread poison in the streets." He unfurled the scroll, his voice steady though anger burned beneath every word. "The gold came from the House of Grace. The orders were given by Lady Ursa, daughter of Lady Grace, to spread word that the new queen is a witch who bewitched the royal bloodline." The hall fell into stunned silence. Cassia's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked at her mother and sister, the two faces that had haunted her since childhood. Lady Grace's calm began to crack. Ursa's smile faltered. "Lies," Lady Grace snapped, but her voice trembled. "You think I would stoop so low?" One of the guards stepped forward, dragging a terrified servant into the light, the same young maid who had once carried food to the Grace household. She fell to her knees, clutching the hem of her dress. "I swear it, my prince," the girl sobbed. "It was them. Lady Grace said the queen bewitched you both. She gave me silver to whisper it in the kitchens, in the courtyard. Everywhere." Ursa's eyes blazed. "You dare accuse me, wretch?" The girl flinched. "You told me yourself. You said she didn't deserve to be queen, that you'd make her fall from grace." The court erupted in murmurs. Nobles turned their eyes toward Ursa and Lady Grace, whispers rising like wind through the hall. "Traitors!" one noble shouted. "They dared to slander the queen!" another cried. "Execute them!" echoed a voice from the back, igniting a wave of angry murmurs that swept through the crowd like wildfire. King George's voice thundered above them. "Enough!" The room fell silent at once. He looked upon the two women with the weight of centuries in his gaze. "You have defied the laws of this court. You have dishonored not only your blood, but the moon that governs us all. The queen is under royal protection, and the spreading of falsehood against her is an act of rebellion against the crown itself." Lady Grace fell to her knees, trembling now. "My king, please, I beg you, I was only—" But Arion raised a hand, silencing her. "You were only jealous," he said. "Jealous of the daughter you cast aside, of the love you couldn't control. You and your daughter sought to ruin her once again, as you always have." Ursa's eyes filled with tears, not of remorse, but of rage. "She ruined me," she screamed. "She took everything. The prince, the crown, the life I was meant to have." "No," Arion said quietly, stepping closer until he stood before her. "You destroyed yourself, and now the world will see it." He turned to the guards. "Take them away." The guards moved in, seizing mother and daughter by the arms. The crowd erupted in applause, some in relief, others in fury. But before they could be dragged away, a soft, steady voice cut through the chaos. "Wait." Cassia rose from her seat beside the throne. Every eye turned to her. Even the king paused. Cassia's voice carried the quiet strength of one who had endured cruelty and still chosen grace. "They hurt me, yes. They humiliated me. But what will killing them change? It won't heal what's been broken. It will only spread more darkness." Ursa looked up sharply, disbelief flashing in her tear-stained eyes. You'd spare us?" Cassia stepped closer, her gaze soft but resolute. "No one is beyond redemption. I will not have your blood staining the floors of this castle. Let exile be your punishment. Let you live with what you've done, far from the comfort of the kingdom you tried to corrupt." Gasps rippled through the hall. Even Arion turned to her, astonished. The Alpha King studied her for a long moment, his stern features softening. "You show the heart of a true queen," he said finally, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "Mercy where others would demand vengeance. Strength in the face of betrayal." Cassia lowered her head respectfully. "A crown means nothing if it sits upon a heart filled with hatred, my king." The king nodded once deeply. "So be it. Lady Grace and Ursa are hereby stripped of their titles and lands. They will be escorted beyond the kingdom's borders before nightfall. Should they ever return, their lives will be forfeit." A hush fell. Ursa's knees buckled. Lady Grace covered her face and wept. As the guards dragged them out, Ursa looked back one last time, her eyes locking with Cassia's. There was hatred there, yes, but beneath it, something else. Regret, fear. The council bowed as the king rose. "Let it be written," he declared. "The queen showed mercy when none expected it. From this day forward, there shall be no more whispers of witchcraft or gossip against the queen or the crown." As they left the hall, Cassia's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the release of it. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. The moon hung low, bathing the royal garden in silver and silence. The night air carried the faint hum of crickets, and the scent of blooming night lilies drifted softly through the air. Cassia stood beside the marble fountain, its water shimmering like liquid moonlight. Her reflection trembled in the pool, a queen forged by pain, mercy, and resilience. She had done what no one expected, chosen mercy over blood, banished her mother and sister instead of ending them. Yet even as the council praised her, a hollow ache lingered in her chest. Power meant nothing when your heart still mourned a love you couldn't forget. Cassia. A quiet, familiar voice broke the stillness. She turned sharply. Arion stood in the shadows between the arching vines. His armor was gone, replaced by simple black garments. No crown, no guard, only a man stripped of pride and title. His eyes, the same silver blue as the night sky, held a sorrow that made her chest tighten. For a moment neither spoke. The wind carried the faint trickle of water between them. "You shouldn't be here," she finally whispered. "If your father finds—" "I don't deserve forgiveness, Cassia," Arion interrupted softly, stepping forward. "I've replayed everything in my head. The day you found Ursa in my chambers, the way you looked at me. Gods, I was blind. I thought I was powerful, in control. But I was a fool, too proud to see that I'd destroyed the only woman who ever loved me honestly." His words hit her like wind through open wounds. She turned away, gripping the edge of the fountain. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't make this harder than it already is." He hesitated, his voice cracking. "I let Ursa manipulate me. I let her twist the truth because it was easier to believe the lie, that you'd betrayed me, than to face how much I loved you. When you stood in that hall and rejected me, I thought I hated you, but I hated myself." Cassia closed her eyes, her breath trembling. He took another step closer, his tone breaking into raw honesty. "When the rumors spread, I didn't go after you because I wanted revenge. I went after them because I couldn't let anyone stain your name again, not after everything I'd done. I wanted to make it right, Cassia, even if you'd never look at me again." She turned, finally meeting his gaze. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and her heart betrayed her. "You've changed," she whispered. "I had to," he said. "Losing you taught me everything power couldn't." The silence stretched, heavy, fragile, sacred. Cassia's lips trembled, her pulse fluttering painfully. She saw not the proud prince who'd mocked her pain, but a man broken and rebuilt by regret. His eyes no longer held arrogance, only devotion and sorrow. And before reason could catch her, she moved. Her hand lifted, trembling, brushing his cheeks. His breath hitched as her fingers lingered. "You've grown," she murmured, "stronger, but gentler. And you," he whispered, "have become everything I was too blind to cherish." The distance between them vanished. Her lips met his, sudden, fierce, unguarded. The world fell away. The months of anger, pain, and longing melted into one breathless heartbeat. His hands rose instinctively, one at her waist, the other at the back of her neck, as if afraid she'd vanish again. The kiss deepened, not one of possession, but of release. A confession without words, a promise without vows. When she finally pulled away, her chest heaved, her eyes glimmering. "I thought I hated you," she said shakily. "But I was lying to myself. Even after everything, I never stopped loving you." He exhaled, his forehead resting against hers. "Then let me spend the rest of my life proving I deserve that love." Cassia still felt the echo of Arion's kiss on her lips, her heart racing faster than it ever had. His hand still lingered near hers, as if afraid that moving would break the fragile peace between them. For a fleeting moment, everything was still, pure, untainted. Then came the sound of measured footsteps, heavy, calm, commanding. Both turned sharply. From the shadows beneath the stone archway, Alpha King George emerged. His tall frame was cloaked in black, his presence as commanding as the moon itself. His piercing silver eyes that once made even the fiercest alphas tremble, softened as they fell upon the two standing by the fountain. Cassia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her instinct screamed for her to step back, to bow, to explain. Guilt surged through her chest, guilt for betraying the loyalty he had shown her, guilt for the tenderness he had offered without demand. She pulled her hand from Arion's grasp, her lips trembling. "My king," she whispered, lowering her gaze. I didn't mean to." But before she could finish, his hand lifted gently. "Do not tremble, Cassia," he said softly. "You have no reason to fear me." His tone held neither anger nor disappointment. It carried a strange warmth, the quiet of understanding. He took a few steps closer, the moonlight glinting on the silver streaks in his hair. "I always knew," he continued, his eyes shifting from Cassia to his son. "From the night you stood before me, defying the court, choosing to reject the prince and claim me, I knew it was not out of love, but out of pain." Arion swallowed hard. "Father." The king raised a hand to silence him, not harshly, but with the weight of authority shaped by love. "I took no offense. In truth, I pitied you both. I saw a bond severed too young, hearts that burned with pride and fear instead of truth. I marked her not to claim her, but to protect her from a world too cruel to understand the weight of her pain." Cassia lifted her gaze, tears glimmering. "Then why didn't you say something?" A faint smile touched the king's lips. "Because healing cannot be commanded. It must be chosen. You both needed time to see each other, not as enemies or lost mates, but as souls who were once one." Arion's voice broke softly. "You knew I still loved her?" "I knew," George said. "And I knew she still loved you, though she tried to bury it beneath duty and pride. I saw it in her eyes whenever your name was spoken." The young prince looked down, ashamed. "I failed her, father. I failed you. I let arrogance blind me." The king's expression softened with something rare. Tenderness. "Then learn from it. Love is not measured in pride, Arion. It's measured in what you are willing to lose for it." A long silence followed, the kind that humbles even kings. Cassia's tears spilled freely. "You've shown me mercy when I deserved none. I took your mark out of vengeance, yet you gave me only peace. Why?" The Alpha King stepped closer, his voice lowering like a benediction. "Because you reminded me of the woman I once loved, your spirit, your fire. My queen was gentle and fierce like you. When she died, I thought the moon would never rise again over my soul." He paused, his eyes glistening with memory. "But when you came into my court, Cassia, it was as if the moon had returned." Cassia pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "Your Majesty." "I'm not your Majesty tonight," he said quietly. "Just a man who has known loss and learned that love, in its truest form, cannot be owned. It can only be honored." He turned to his son and laid a firm hand on his shoulder. "You are my heir, Arion, my blood, my pride. But I am old enough to know when love should pass from my hands into another's. Cassia was never mine to keep. She was sent to heal what pride destroyed. In you, in me, in this house." Arion blinked rapidly, emotion catching in his throat. "Father," George's gaze softened further. "Do not thank me, my son. Thank her for giving us both what we had forgotten. Forgiveness." Cassia couldn't hold back anymore. She fell to her knees, her tears wetting the marble at his feet. "You are too kind, my king. I never deserved your compassion." The king bent slightly, touching her shoulder with a father's tenderness. "You deserve peace, child. And you deserve love, not the kind born of duty or power, but of choice." He looked between them, father, son, queen, and smiled faintly. "The moon bears witness. You have my blessing." Cassia gasped softly, lifting her gaze to meet Arion's. His eyes shimmered with tears, his jaw trembling with emotion. "Father, are you certain?" Arion asked, voice breaking. I have never been more certain of anything, the king said. Take care of her. And of yourself. He turned then, the hem of his cloak brushing over the marble as he walked toward the archway. For a moment the silver light caught his profile, a strong jaw, tired eyes, a faint, peaceful smile. Cassia rose slowly, watching him disappear into the shadows of the castle. Her heart was heavy, yet light, like a storm breaking into dawn. Arion took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. He freed us, she whispered. Arion nodded. No. He loved us enough to let go. The grand hall shimmered with silver light as the moon reached its zenith. Every noble, every warrior, every elder gathered in silence, the air thick with awe and history. Tonight would mark the end of one bond, and the beginning of another. Alpha King. George stood before the sacred altar, his silver hair glinting beneath the moonbeams. Cassia stepped forward, her long gown flowing like liquid starlight. Between them stood the priestess, her voice echoing through the hall. Two hearts once bound by duty now release one another in peace. George looked at Cassia, his gaze soft, no longer the look of a man who desired but of one who understood. Cassia, he said quietly, his tone heavy with memories and respect. I release you. Not because I stop caring, but because I finally understand what love must be. Free. Cassia's eyes shimmered. And I release you, my king, she whispered, her voice steady though her heart trembled. May your heart find peace as mine has. A surge of light enveloped them both. The mate bond, once forged in confusion, power, and vengeance, shattered gently like glass dissolving into starlight. Gasps filled the hall as the glow faded, leaving only calm, sacred stillness. Then Cassia turned, and there he was. Arion stood at the edge of the dais, his heart in his eyes, his wolf blazing beneath his skin. For so long he had fought between pride and love, duty and desire. But now at last the path was clear. He stepped toward her slowly, reverently, as though afraid the dream might vanish. Cassia didn't move. She only watched, her breath trembling, her soul open. When he reached her, he lowered his head in a gesture of devotion, not dominance. Cassia, he said, his voice rough, trembling, true. I failed you once. I will never fail you again, if you'll still have me. Not as prince or alpha, but as your mate. The hall held its breath. Cassia smiled softly, tears glimmering. You already are, she whispered. Then, before the moon and before the kingdom, Arion marked her, a mark of love, not claim. Cassia's fingers trembled as she marked him back, sealing their bond anew. The moon above flared bright, a radiant burst of silver blessing their union. The priestess raised her staff. The bond is sealed, by mercy, by fire, and by love reborn. The nobles erupted in applause, some weeping, some bowing. Even the king's stoic eyes glistened with pride as he stepped forward, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. You have restored honor to this throne, he said softly, and hope to my heart. Rule together, not as heirs of my reign, but as builders of a new dawn. Outside, the moon rose higher, casting its light across the kingdom, across the rivers, the forests, the broken lands now healed. The darkness that once divided them was gone. Later, on the royal balcony, the three stood side by side, the king, his son, and the Luna, who united them. The night wind carried the scent of roses and the whispers of wolves howling in celebration. Cassia leaned into Arion's side, his arm around her, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. Do you think peace will last? She asked softly. Arion smiled, his eyes on the moon. As long as love does. King George's deep voice rumbled beside them, calm and content. Then it will last forever. The moon glowed brighter, bathing them in its eternal light, a witness to forgiveness, redemption, and a love that refused to die. And so, beneath that moon, the same that had seen betrayal, now shown the promise of forever. Cassia, the silver wolf who once ran alone, had finally found her home. If you enjoyed this series, tell me where you are watching from. Favorite character and your heart-stopping moment. We love reading your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to check out other amazing stories from the playlist until we bring another love story your way. Bye for now.